What's up guys, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about high stakes negotiation as a builder, how I'm actively thinking about this and what I'm actively doing in terms of negotiations. And like always with these videos, the main mission is to show how builds raw and real, to show you the good, the bad, the ugly, what it is that I'm actively implementing in terms of mental models and how I'm scaling those mental models into the future to basically also come in and solve what hurts, basically to come in to businesses and organizations and to be the chief problem solvers and basically just build back-end infrastructure for businesses and enabling them to scale, and also just to call in visionaries, basically people that understand what it is that we're actively doing and solving for, and ultimately just to build a network of cool people doing cool things at the same time. So like always, I like to break these down into 5 steps of how I am using negotiation to build a $100 million back-end empire, which is what I have as a vision for the ultimate end goal for us building Killer Chaos OS. We're still pretty far, to be honest with you, but I know that into the future these videos are only going to be the springboard that we're going to be using to basically scale that up, and also just to build better mental models and to think things through. So like always, 5 simple steps to think about this, with number one being know your value, to lead with proof. So basically just saying, hey, we need to make sure that each and every single time we think about things or just come into a negotiation, we also need to ultimately just lead with proof and making sure that what it is that we're showing, we have proof for it. I think proof is the number one thing that you need to ultimately have, and that's ultimately what I like to strive for, to say, hey, we have done this before, we've built XYZ stuff. And that's why I think in the beginning, especially when you don't have clients, it's super important to just build stuff for free. I know a lot of people may say no, don't charge or things like that, but I think in the beginning it's super valuable to just build stuff for free and ultimately just learn from that, because the lessons that you learn from those are ultimately just way more than getting paid in the beginning. And I know that into the future, like one of those things that we've done in the beginning of just building stuff for free has ultimately led us to getting bigger and bigger deals, and that is what we're actively just building for and solving for on this journey to basically build $100 million worth of impact, and also just to reshape industries and ultimately just to inspire millions of people. And I know that right now we are still by far not even near, but I know that into the future we only going to use this as a springboard, like I said, for mental models, and also just to learn and also just keep on pushing the needle forward, and also just building better and saying, hey, wise key is no one pays for potential, they pay for proof. And as much as you can say, hey, we have potential to do XYZ, that simply does not cut it. We ultimately have to make sure that each and every single day we're building proof, we're building proof of concept as well, to say, hey, we've done XYZ, so we can also plug it into your business. You never go to a shop and then say, hey, I want a potential of you making sushi. You ultimately just pay for the sushi, which is the result, and they have made sushi like 1,000 or hundreds of times. So ultimately you're just paying for the result, and also just leading with that, making sure that each and every time we're coming to a position of creating value or negotiating for the value exchange, that we're ultimately just making sure that we have proof of concept, and even just proof that we've done it and we've built stuff like that before, because ultimately proof builds trust, and we want to make sure that we build as much trust as possible and have as many possible trust points as well, and ultimately just just making sure that we're providing as much value as we possibly can. And how I'm doing this is enabling planners to save 20 hours per week with what it is that we're building in terms of our system. So making sure that we're automating and also segmenting certain parts of their business, basically just building a back-end infrastructure for them, and ultimately just allowing them to scale, and ultimately just making sure that we understand each and every single moving part within their business, so that we're ultimately just providing as much value as we possibly can. And also just 54,000 impressions from these videos, making sure that, hey, from these videos I'm building a proof of concept, or just proof that I can actively do this for 100 days straight, and ultimately just prove that consistency and that momentum, which I know is pretty hard, but I know that each and every single day just hitting the nail in the wall and just building that level of consistency is ultimately just going to build trust and proof as well. And ultimately within that proof, you never know what's going to happen. So I'm not 100% sure what it is that will pop into the future, or like after 100 videos, maybe we'll continue, maybe it won't, but right now I'm having too much fun, and I just want to keep pumping these videos up until we get to 100, and then we just start with phase 2 or phase 3, or we'll just basically see from there. And saying, hey, deals unlocked from backend flow redesign. So basically we redesigned the backend flow that we ultimately just tweaked up and said, hey, we coming in and we're ultimately redesigning this backend flow, and ultimately just unlocked new deals through that to say, hey, we needed to make sure that we're providing value by redesigning the entire backend flow for a non-custom parts. And then we just basically come in and then we ultimately just build off of that and saying, hey, that's what I lead when it comes to pitching Killer Chaos OS, making sure that, hey, we're ultimately building as much proof as we possibly can to show that, hey, you can trust us and we can actively build what it is that you want us to build. And we have done it for our previous clients as well, because proof is just so valuable. If you have proof and also proof of concept to say, hey, we have proof, just have that proof, and then you ultimately are able to close deals, and also just to be in a position where you don't have any proof, where you don't have any proof and you don't have anything to show for what it is that you're pitching. And then ultimately that sometimes you do get it across the line, but ultimately it's just much better to have that proof and saying, hey, don't talk, just show. So ultimately just showing what it is that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, what we're building, and also just to list 3 outcomes that you've delivered and open your next deal with one, and ultimately just open the next deal with one, show the 3 outcomes that you have proactively built, and then having the key question of saying, hey, what's the sharpest win to lead with? So what is the one lead or win that you've had within your business and organization to say, hey, we've had XYZ win for our clients, so let's lead with that and basically build that trust and proof that we actively can build what it is that we're pitching for, and ultimately just providing as much value as we possibly can. And then into the second point, which is researching their pain, solve it before they ask. I think this is so important, and why this is key is high level people don't care about you. That's just how I've interpreted it. They don't necessarily care about you, they care about what's bleeding. So basically the problems within their business, they care about that so much because it's affecting them. They're not particularly focused about what you're wearing, what you're doing, XYZ. They just need their problem solved, and that's just the root of it. And then saying, hey, I found the planner's pain, vendors no shows. So basically making sure that, hey, they don't have vendors, so how can we combat that, and making sure that we're building a custom solution and then pitching a fix using our build rights in the first call to say, hey, we built XYZ, no fluff, no value, and then just getting the deal done through that, to making sure that, hey, we're providing as much value as we possibly can from the get-go, and we're not just pitching without actively understanding what their root problem is within their business, and ultimately saying, hey, you can incorporate a play for yourself, which is check your prospects X or reviews, which is one thing that I'm also proactively approaching, which is looking at the reviews, seeing how our competition is losing people in terms of the negative reviews, what they're lacking in, and ultimately just improving on that, or ultimately just the service delivery, just understanding how they service delivery by simply just going on reviews and proactively just pitching and saying, hey, XYZ is not working, here's how we can fix that. And that is a common theme within your business in terms of your fulfillment flow or your entire process. We need to make sure that, hey, we're actively just solving their problem before they even ask. So ultimately just having that approach of saying, hey, what can we do to proactively just stand out and provide as much value as we possibly can, and saying, hey, find one pain point and then build a 3-sentence solution. So it needs to be easily digestible. People need to understand what it is that you're actively speaking about, because if they don't understand, or you're too technical with your explanation, they're ultimately not going to understand what it is that you're trying to solve for them. Saying, hey, you're going with technical terms to someone that is a lawyer with IT terms to say, hey, we need to make sure that the APIs and all these things, they're ultimately not going to understand that, and you need to be able to speak their language when you are proactively just speaking to them as well, and ultimately just solving their problems before they ask. But you ultimately also need to understand how to speak to them, and then saying, hey, what's the key question that we could ask here is, what's one chaos that is draining your target's margins right now? Ultimately just asking, what is draining your target, the ideal customer that you want to work with, what is draining their margins, and how can you proactively build a solution around that? And then saying, hey, number 3 is frame set the frame, own the convo. I think this is important when you hop onto a sales call to ultimately say, hey, whoever sets the frame controls the game. You need to make sure that we're proactively just building control within their pitch, making sure that, hey, we're speaking to them, but we're proactively just asking questions that ultimately lead to a level of understanding that unlocks what their core problem is for them, and then allows you to then pitch or to basically offer them a solution that they can then use to ultimately get rid of their pain, and saying, hey, this isn't software, this is a backend to scale your $500,000 wedding business. Or ultimately saying, hey, we want to make sure that we're helping you scale by making sure we're syncing each and every moving part within your business, and ultimately just creating as much value as possible. And then saying, hey, that line flipped the power dynamic to ultimately saying, hey, we're not just pitching software, we're not just pitching landing pages or websites or anything of that nature. We are building backend infrastructure for a certain ICP, and ultimately that frame ultimately creates a powerful shift, which I believe is one thing that you need to have, and what we're also pushing for, and saying, hey, your play is frame the convo like this. I don't sell websites, I install operational systems that kill chaos. Ultimately just refining the frame, how you basically positioning it, and saying, hey, what's the key question that you could ask here, which is, how can you make your offer the only logical move? Basically coming in and saying, hey, how can I possibly make this person, or the person that I'm offering this solution, because at the end of the day, you just want to help them. I think that's what sales, or hopping on a sales call, should be about, is ultimately just helping them, not just taking their money, but ultimately just being there on the phone call to say, hey, I know that you have a problem and I want to offer you the solution. So you, in your own right, or in my own right, I need to make sure that I'm clearly taking the initiative to making sure that, hey, I know what needs to be done. I'm researching their pain. I'm owning the conversation because I understand that, hey, this person needs my help in order to solve their problems. And I'm proactively going to take that approach to making sure that, hey, I'm helping them. And rather than saying, hey, I just want to make a quick buck off of them, which I don't think is good. I mean, it happens, but I want to take the approach of saying, hey, I want to proactively just help our clients or leads that come into our space, to ultimately just help them create value, and just create value for them and also for their business. And then saying, hey, number 4, which is walking away power, chase, don't chase, attract. I think this is also super important, especially when I was first starting out, which is desperate repels, options attract. And I think this is so important to saying, hey, said no to a lowball deal. I most often say no if the deal does not make sense. I've said this multiple times that, hey, even though as much as I may think I may need the deal, the headaches and the pressures that come with that simply just aren't worth it. And saying, hey, 7 days later they came back, I 2x the price, because simply I just would not take it for that specific level. I think having a minimum for what it is that you're proactively going to be building for it is super important. Just owning your value, or as well, is also very important within your business infrastructure and what it is that you're building, because you know the value and you should never compromise on that. And I don't think that we, or I, would ever compromise on the value that I know that I can provide my clients, and also people that are coming into our space and saying, hey, why? Because they saw that I didn't need it. If you proactively tell yourself in your mind, and this is a funny thing that I always tell myself, that, hey, I don't need this deal to happen, but if it does happen, then good, let's go. Like, this is gonna be super pumped. I'm gonna be super pumped if this deal goes through, but ultimately I need to make sure that, hey, if I lose it, I lose it. I'm just gonna go out there and get more, and that's okay. And saying, hey, what's the one play that you could have? Build one fallback before any call. Ultimately, just making sure that, hey, you have the pipeline filled. You have options for you to say, hey, even if this doesn't go through, it's okay, because you can just get more deals. I think that's super important, and you can help other people. And just thinking of things through, just saying, hey, I want to proactively just help as many people as possible, and saying, hey, another prospect, another offer, another lane. You walk differently when you don't need the win. So ultimately saying, hey, I attract the wins rather than chase them. I am making sure that I am a person worthy of attracting deals to come to me. But ultimately you have to grind, and I just know that for now we are ultimately just need to take this approach, and ultimately just understand this and just keep going at it, and saying, hey, what's your price floor, and will you be able to walk away if it's not met? Saying, hey, I need to make sure that I have a price floor of of what price I would not work for. And I think this is super important for any stage to have a minimum price floor. I know when you're starting out, just doing free work, like I said in the beginning, is super important. But once you have those case studies and those portfolios, and you've gotten to the point where you know that, hey, I can charge and I know what I'm doing, then proactively just having a price floor is also super important. And just also constantly raising it as time goes and making sure that, hey, if we're able to do XYZ, let's bump it up a bit, because we know that the value that we provide is worth X much, and just constantly just building that, which ultimately leads to closing with momentum, striking when it's hot, a sense of urgency, which is super important. I think this is super important, just having that sense of urgency, of just replying to messages like instantly. I think that is super important, because heat fades, deals die in hesitation. Just don't hesitate. I think each and every single day, like when the demo ends Monday, let's start right away. Let's not even waste time, because once you start delaying things, ultimately they're gonna look for options, and you just have to be that person that says, hey, if someone else will get it done in a week, let's get it done in 3 days, let's get it done in 2 days. And that sense of urgency, because they need their pain solved right away, which most people do. They need their pain solved right away, and ultimately if you can bring them closest to their solution, you ultimately just bridge that gap in terms of having them say yes, and ultimately just bringing that value for them and saying, hey, got a deal signed in 48 hours, not because I was pushy, but because I was clear. I said, hey, we'll get it done in a week, and everyone else said, hey, we'll get it done in 2 to 3 weeks. And ultimately saying, hey, I end the call with certainty, just making sure that I'm ending with certainty. I know what it is that I'm doing, because I've been through the fire and I'm still in the trenches as well, funny enough. And ultimately just building that, like, just saying, hey, no, I'll get back to you, just let's go, here's what's next. Just being super clear on what it is that is next in terms of the approach, because once there's hesitation, that trust of, hey, does he really know what's going on, starts popping up in his mind. And ultimately you don't want that. And ultimately I see that for myself, and I'm proactively have been building around this and saying, hey, what's the key question, which is, what's the next deal you can close this week and super fast? What is the deal that you could do? You know, you have a variety of skill stacks that you have. What is the one thing that you could sell or do right away and solve someone else's problem, and ultimately just create value for them today, and ultimately just proactively just building around that. So yeah, this is my super quick approach. I wanted to take it nice and easy. But yeah, I super enjoyed this video. This is day 41 if I'm not mistaken. I'm super excited to be continuing to do a lot more. So day 100 is just gonna be super clean, and I'm super excited. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to connect with me on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and make sure to comment if you guys have any questions, and make sure to subscribe as well. And I will see you guys in the next video.